But I also want to talk a little bit about materials for treatment and kind of like what different materials do physically to sound. Um, yeah, Jeff, do you want to start off on some of the notes that you're eager to share?
Sure, sure. And yeah, we should mention, of course, you're more than welcome to ask any questions in the little chat to the right, at least on my Discord screen. And we will try to catch up on as many questions as we can at the end of this.
Yeah, I'll keep it.
Well, are you going to be the secretary?
I'll try. I'll
Okay,
keep an eye on things and call back to them. But go for it.
cool, very cool. Yeah. Again, no particular order, but we'll just try to keep this at least logical enough that we don't tend to yak on too much and not only lose your interest but cause you more confusion. Yeah, as far as the physics of sound are concerned, you really only have to concern yourself with two basic categories, and that is not just the sound that is being made in your space, as far as its frequency range. You don't have to concern yourself much with that. Frequency range being, something very high, something very low, et cetera, et cetera. But the physics of sound, the only two things you need to keep in mind are reflective surfaces and also sounds that cannot be reflected by them because the science of sound requires that the lower the frequency, the thicker the absorption should be, or the thicker the obstruction should be, and that is a sound coming through a wall. So, those are the only two major issues I think you should keep in mind when it comes to being so physics of sound and having to stand at the front of the class at a chalkboard and try to explain specific things. And as long as you have some idea and keeping in mind, yeah, higher frequencies like S's, they tend to get absorbed or reflected very easily by the simplest components, whether they're blankets or sound panels. I love the ones that are behind Randy. Um, just really thick flannel blankets, for example. They can not only absorb high frequencies, but they can also, excuse me, tend to prevent them coming through very thin objects. And after understanding how sound either comes through walls and spaces or the sounds you're making get reflected or deflected off of surfaces around you, the only general suggestion I'd make as far as how you're going to use your recording space is a combination of where you place your microphone in your space and being aware of the surfaces around it. I wouldn't go into too much more detail after that as far as, getting all sciencey.
Okay. Well, those are important considerations. If I can distill those for anyone who's taking like bullet points, um, reflection and absorption, and kind of to I guess piggyback or echo a little bit or to reflect a little bit of what Jeff was
Yeah,
saying.
I like that. Good pun.
Yeah, uh, your mid-range think of sound, like, as we perceive it on a frequency spectrum. It's literally a number value from, like, 0 all the way up to infinity. What we hear, our hearing range, by the time we're adults, it tops out at around, like, 17,000 hertz or 18,000 hertz. You might hear that as 18 kilohertz or 18,000 hertz, um, but that's our range. There are sounds constantly above that range. We don't tend to hear as low as 0. I think we kinda bottom out at, like, 30 hertz, which is, like, rumbly bass tones. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
those
The general numbers I remember hearing from the get go at birth, maybe babies can hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, 20
Right,
kilohertz. But
and it only
that's really
goes down
stretching.
as you age,
Yeah,
just because the way your biology works, like, you have these very fine they're hairs in the inside of your cochleas, and the more they're stimulated and just the older you get, they just kinda, like, fall out, and they stop resonating and vibrating in response to certain frequencies, and then you just don't perceive things. So, anytime you have ear ringing, tinnitus, or things like that after like concerts or loud noises, that ring is like a specific pitch, and that's basically, when it fades out, you're not really going to be able to perceive that pitch anymore, which is why if you were ever a kid in high school with the dog whistle ringtone, the teachers just can't hear it. It's because that's kind of fallen off, it's rounded off for them. So anyway, on that spectrum range of high frequency and low frequency, starting at 0 all the way up to 20,000 hertz, the sounds that are going to reflect or bounce around like it would in the shower when you sing or in a stairwell when you close the door and it echoes. Those are going to be sounds that are in like they're basically above the low frequencies, like 100 hertz and above, arbitrarily. And those reflections are basically the physical motion of airwaves that are going to be moving, hit a surface, and then bounce back into another direction. And what we want in our recording booths is to stop that reflection from happening. Um, and we go about that a number of ways that you're all familiar with: foam, um, diffusers. Diffusers are complex surfaces that aren't necessarily made of foam, like the little geometric things I have behind me. And so what happens is when the sound hits it, it can either be absorbed by an absorbent material or it can break apart. And when it breaks apart, it redistributes its direction and just doesn't bounce back. It just kind of like diffuses. The other range, we're just keeping it extremely simple, the low frequency ranges, they don't tend to bounce around a lot. What they tend to do is just build up. So they build up in corners. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean vertical corners. It can also be horizontal corners, like the floorboards or the ceiling corner. And if you have your microphone, we're just going to be brief on this part. Your microphone is like in the corner of a room. It's in the little low frequency rumble zone that all the bass will build up in. So that can contribute to noise that your mic will pick up on, but you don't even perceive with your ears, and it's going to make your noise floor higher. So there are ways to address that preemptively with building your booth. Um, but I guess that's kind of my take on the physics of sound. High frequencies are going to travel and bounce. Low frequencies are just going to build up in corners. Yeah, and then what we know about them physically tells us how to treat them. Um, Jeff, what were your notes on location?
Location, location. Yeah, generally speaking, that's intended to cover the centering of your recording space in that room, in that space, whether it's a loft, whether it's your basement, whether it's a bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. And then a bit more specifically, the actual location of your mic, your recording equipment. So yeah, if we were to imagine everybody who's joined us today, if you were to set up a new recording space, let alone a booth, the best location for obvious reasons would be the quietest space that you have available to you, whether it's the top floor, whether it's the basement. And how you set that up, I'm going to jump ahead to the topic of it's all about the mic. It really is all about the mic, not just how you use it, and you don't speak right into it. You give yourself some distance. But let's assume everybody understands and or owns a cardioid microphone. They're designed to pick up extremely less volume at the back as they are the front. So if you keep that in mind, almost everything else you do acoustically, no, basically everything, uh, can can be either a benefit to your recording or a detriment, depending on where you aim it, depending on whether it's too close to a surface like a desk or the ceiling, whether it's too close to walls. And so, yeah, if you can back up and maybe imagine yourself being a 3D rendering artist, picture a space in a room and try to center that space as much as you can in that room. So, as we were talking about how the physics of sound work, the farther your microphone is away from hard surfaces, aka walls, the less volume that sound will bounce back to the microphone. And then therefore, when you build a booth, you're just blocking the sound reflections and deflections that much more. So if you can start a new booth from scratch, totally, put it in the center of a room if you can. And then also angle it so your microphone is not pointed directly at any flat surface. Aim it slightly towards a corner. And I know that sounds definitely something that you've never heard before, but that is just taking advantage of what the physics of sound are. Build a space, turn it so that by natural instinct, when you walk into the booth and get ready to press record, you're actually facing slightly into a corner.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the location of gear in that space, well, then a lot of that has to do with you being able to reach buttons to stand up when you perform something really wild because you really want to get into character. So the location of your recording space and then you using that space. There's a lot of tips and tricks like that that are about specific location that once you set it up or tweak it, move things around, for anybody that has a current sort of movable booth in their homes right now. Yeah, make some tweaks as far as aiming things, where the microphone sits with all your recording equipment, et cetera, et cetera. General location tips all around.
Yeah. What I like to kind of help people imagine, for those of us who are visual learners, the parallel I draw is like your mic as a flashlight, and
Mm.
if you were using a flashlight to capture what needs to be experienced, you're going to be very intentional about where you point your flashlight. Your microphone actually has a capture radius, and Jeff was talking about that with cardioid microphones. The capture radius is in a heart shape around the microphone. So if you imagined that a flashlight had like a little heart, like uh, mask over it, and then when you shined it, you would just see an illuminated heart. Think kind of like that coming out of your microphone, but it's three dimensional. But where you point your microphone, it captures more than just you. So my microphone right now is pointed at the wall behind me, subsequently also at me. But the way that I angle my microphone has it pointed up so that if it were a flashlight and I were to align a flashlight with it, it's illuminating this area, which is where the sound is coming from. But in your case, you're going to be in a booth, not necessarily just a treated room. Some of you might be in a treated room, but in a booth, there are sounds that you want to consider outside of your booth. And if you have a PVC booth, especially, because if you haven't treated the space outside of your PVC booth, it's going to be reflecting out there. And if your microphone is pointed at where the reflections are occurring, you're going to get reflections. If your microphone is pointed at an exterior wall or window, you're going to get bleed from outside. Um, yeah, that is one reason why people choose very specific microphone placement. And very specific microphones with, we'll say, specialized polarity patterns or capture radiuses. Um, okay. Yeah, I do definitely want to like double the sentiment that like picking the quietest place that you can is going to be the most important. The reason being, it's going to require you to treat it less to make your booth sound professional. And if you have to do less to do that, you're saving money. It's more, therefore, on the cheap. Um, uh, I think the one thing I'm probably going to spend the most time on here is going to be materials, um, because there are a lot of options. There's already questions in there that kind of talk about specific approaches for booths. But do you want to talk about the microphone next, as the next point, it being all about the mic, or did you kind of already do that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
as
far as
far
any
as any,
more details, yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Okay, cool.
The
Again,
pickup pattern of a cardioid, basically, yeah, that's the big advantage. If you can imagine not pointing the mic at the loudest part of your room, the door into it, that kind of thing. I think that pretty well covers the mics. Yeah, if needed, we'll get into more details later, like omnidirectional pickup patterns and all that. But that's probably beyond today's scope.
Probably. Okay. Yeah, and again, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. What I'm doing is when people have questions, I'll copy and paste your questions into a separate document. That way, we can just go over them afterwards. So if you have them, feel free to type them. It's not interrupting anything.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So the next point that we have down here is the space needed. There's a couple of considerations for minimal space, or even what goes into the space. Um, I'm happy to sweep up after you here if you want to start that one, Jeff.
Sweep up after me. The space that's needed, yeah. Well, I know it is very well and maybe virtually impossible to guess how much actual space you're going to need over the course of hopefully years that you'd commit to the projects and possibly the career that you want. But let's say, yeah, you're going to get work, you're going to get a role that's going to require you to stand up and maybe get really, really, really wild that way. So yeah, get your three-dimensional being into the mode of reaching out and imagining getting as wild as your arms can get. So on a simple scale, I would suggest if you have the luxury to go for any space that's like 7 foot by 8 foot, or let's call it 8 by 8, or 2.5 yards to 2.5 meters square. Now, obviously, the width isn't as quite a concern as the length, because for the most part, and for the purpose of being so pragmatic, you'd have a space in front of you with all your gear, not just your computer, but two or three monitors. Obviously, anything extra that might hold a script, some lighting, a place to put your wah wah. So, yeah, think 2 by 3 meters, 2 by 3 yards, and start with that. Getting back to the mic, the kind of booths I know everybody has seen, but it may not have registered. The kind of booths that are excellent recording spaces are the ones that have as few parallel walls as possible. So if you have the freedom to build a PVC frame and covering it with 2 or 3 layers of blankets, and or the more extreme freedom of actually making a walled one, if you don't buy one online, give yourself enough space to get wild and crazy, including height, actually. And if you can, prevent any two surfaces from being parallel to each other.
Hmm?
And
Also, make me interested.
oh, who is that?
You're unmuted.
Someone.
I don't mind. I just felt a little ghosty being here in my dark, deep basement. Yeah, so if you can, and if you have the luxury to make your own space, even if it is just blanket walls, try to prevent any two surfaces from being parallel to each other. So oddly angled walls and what have you are going to be certainly beneficial to you down the road, just for the sake of getting used to being in a room that doesn't have parallel walls. And wherever you have the luxury of pointing your microphone to the most acoustic absorption and reflection surfaces, consider putting your door either to one side or the other. So again, that's taking advantage on a typical cardioid microphone pickup pattern. It picks up much more volume at the front than it does the back. And those should be about the only major concerns at the start for not just the space that's needed for your performing, but for access to the equipment, easy in and out. A little tip and trick about a smaller recording space. The topic of ventilation is still something that everybody is going to have to deal with. intentionally put a couple of holes in the top corners of your booth on the back side of the microphone. Because the mic picks up so much less, leave a couple of holes up in the top corners. That's going to draw air out of your space, and that can help drastically.
Yeah. Okay.
Remotes. Any kind of remote that you can think of that will help you operate, a Bluetooth remote for your DAW, for example. Um, any any cheap technology that might help you once you really dive into a lot of different types of roles that make it easier for you to stay in character and kind of forget about the tech around you. Making it very easy to press start and record, start recording, stop recording. Give some consideration to those types of tools and accessories and advantages. Again, that will help you stay in character, keep focused on the script, and stay as relaxed as you can to help you forget about it all. Yeah, yeah, forget about it all.
Those are good points, especially utilizing your space to kind of give you like fewer things to worry about outside of your performance. And ideally that's what this is. Like you're kind of like think of it like pre-engineering by physically just treating your space and kind of arranging it in a way that lets you work. And that way when you do record, you don't have to ask the question like how much processing should I be doing on my audio? The answer is always none. None processing is how much you should be doing on your audio. But sometimes you kind of have to because it's not set up that way yet, and you're just doing your thing, like, best you can. You don't know what you don't know. But what ends up happening is if you have to process because your space isn't, touched up a lot, it's a bit of a misrepresentation of what your audio quality is gonna be, and if they bring you on the project, this happened to me recently, and then I have to do more work subsequently. So then I end up doing like twice the time of work and they paid me twice as much as they budgeted for. Um, I'm not completely upset about that, but I know someone else was. So that's a consideration to kind of think down the line of production when you make the efforts to like pick the order of your investments, whether it's investment of time or money. And in this case, treating your space is it's gonna save everybody a lot. um, I
Yeah.
think one thing that I really maybe we can tie this into a question because someone asked about um, studio bricks and whisper room and stuff like that. Um, I I don't know that I think they're overrated. I do think that they're probably overpriced, but I wouldn't call that overrated because some people cannot be handy. Some people cannot be invasive with the modifications they make to upgrade their space. And for some people, that's just going to be worth the price point. Um, and it's also peace of mind for some companies. But with what Jeff was saying about parallel surfaces, if you think about what we just talked about with reflections, it's like a game of pong, and it's like if neither of the paddles moved and the ball just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and that's your reflection happening. And you're going to hear that if it's just parallel surfaces. So I don't know why these companies make them in parallelograms, but a pentagon would be an amazing chef. It would be great, but when you're gonna spend like $10,000 on one of those booths, that's already less intuitive to me because it's a parallelogram, and then 2, most of them come with windows that you kind of then have to add more treatment to, and I think if you were gonna spend 10,000 and then an additional 30, you probably could've if you were handy or could get a contractor, you might have saved some money doing it that way. Because most contractors know their stuff, especially with isolation, sonic isolation. Um, it might be worth shopping for that too, like through contractors. You might save money and get something completely unique and have a little bit left over to maybe have a backup mic or upgrade your interface or get a preamp. But um, that's kind of on the higher end of investment and interest. Um, On a not so high end of that, you do have a PVC booth option, but with both of those, what Jeff's talking about with there being enough room to kind of like move and emote like a little bit. The other thing to consider is not just nice to move around. Um, it's also nice to have enough space to not have your mic perpetually in a bass trap. Um, because if your mic's like closer than like a foot from a wall, um, that's basically what you're getting. You're getting a resonance buildup against the wall from those low frequencies that kind of collect there. And your mic is just going to be eating that up. And then that's coming into your mic at the same time your voice is, and your noise floor is going to look like that. And people are going to think, wow, what terrible audio. It's not, it's just mic technique, which does affect your audio, but it doesn't mean that you have like bad audio. You could just move your mic away from the wall and put some dense material up to absorb the bass. Yeah, and if you take anything away from approaches to treatment, absorb the low frequencies. Actually, for voiceover, just absorb everything, but absorb the low frequencies especially, and diffuse or absorb everything else. Yeah, and it's a little easier to do that when you have just a little bit of space. Patrick had mentioned something about 2-inch foam. I freaking love 2-inch foam. I tell people don't do anything smaller than 2-inch foam. I have a couple of 1-inch foam things like I don't know if you can kind of see it, but like back there on the panel behind the keyboards, that's it's like an insulation board that's like 3 inches thick, and then I put a 1-inch foam over that because those 1-inch foams don't really absorb much. Um, that I find your clothes in your closet don't absorb anything. Just imagine like if I put my clothes over my ears, it doesn't really change how well I can hear things outside of it, and that's kind of the effectiveness of clothes in the closet. So you definitely want to get some foam to put on the walls there. Doesn't have to be fancy state of the art foam. 2-inch foam is fantastic. I have kind of done a cheap mod here where I'll take 2-inch foam, I'll glue a piece of cardboard. This is like from a shoebox or something. When the glue dries, I'll then put a Velcro 3M strip and then put that on the wall, and you can just put it there if you can't put holes in the wall or mount things. If you can, I try to recommend doing that in like a walled space. Drywall is just going to be way better at keeping sounds out than a PVC booth will because, like I was talking about, the fabric doesn't stop too much. But if you have to go PVC booth, which some people do, I highly suggest maybe double layering the moving blankets on every wall. The reason being is because one blanket doesn't do a whole lot. Two blankets tends to do a lot more. It's almost disproportionately beneficial. And also, moving blankets are cheap. You can buy them. You can buy them kind of like in bundles. I think I've seen packs at like hardware stores of like 8 moving blankets for like $25. You know, you can get it on sale if you have a coupon or if they're just doing a sale or something. Like do it. Sometimes with foam, you can get foam. Uh, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can just get acoustic foam, which obviously does the job. You can also get like upholstery foam, which is like furniture foam from like your craft store. If you have like a Joanne Fabric or something, or a Hobby Lobby, they always have Michael's Arts and Crafts. They always have coupons. They're always price matching and stuff. Um, you can get some foam there in bulk for pretty cheap, and all you gotta do is cut it. Um, yeah, if you want it to be cheaper, you're gonna have to be ready to DIY a lot of it. But the other option, which I recently redeemed, was memory foam mattress toppers. They're normally not cheap, but there was Black Friday sale, and I'm gonna make capitalism work for me. So I got a couple of them, and I've since fastened a few of them to the walls in the room over, and they work fantastic. They're dense, absorbent, and you have a lot of options there. Um, Technically speaking, or I guess from a standpoint of obstacles, how the hell do you get like a mattress foam topper to like stay on your wall, right? Um, Couple of approaches you can do depending on your degrees of handiness and ability. Um, I literally just took some like wooden framing boards. They're like these beams that are like an inch thick from like the lumber section. They're 89 cents a pop, and they start off at 8 feet. That's the standard floor to ceiling height. So I got a couple of those, and then I fasten them to the wall, kind of like brackets, and then I just slide the foam behind it, and then the foam's going to stay there. If you cannot be invasive on your drywall, you don't have a stud finder or something, or you're just not confident or can't do that, you can get shower curtain rods or curtain rods with like the padded bumpers on the side, and you can extend those floor to ceiling and kind of adjust how tightly they sit against the wall and put your foam there. Um, that's way easier to do in a closet than it is with a whole room. So I would recommend, if you have a closet, to do that. If you're not going to take the PVC booth, I can confidently reassure you that that will be more effective acoustically than a PVC booth, because with the PVC booth, you're still going to have to treat outside the booth. But with that, you can kind of just cover your walls in one fell swoop or two fell swoops, and then get a draft stopper for your door, slide it right under, things don't come in. Um, yeah, it's going to sound tight. It's going to sound very quiet. And the only thing that you can do or have to worry about after that is exterior sounds like rumble and things like that. But you know, there's a couple of ways to kind of meet and mitigate those that don't necessarily involve just the treatment of your space. Some microphones have high pass filters built into them. You're not engineering anything. You're flipping a switch, and it'll tell you in the manual, high pass filter for this device cuts off at 80 hertz, whatever. Like nobody's voice goes that low anyway. You're not touching your voice if you flip that switch. You won't hear the difference, but it will lower your noise floor. And you're not processing or mixing anything. You have still done none processing, so we're good. Um, Patrick asked a pretty important question. Could you use something like an automute blanket? Absolutely. Automute blankets are like heavy, thick blankets. They're like PVC molded, and they're not very reflective, but they're super absorbent. They're very heavy. I have seen people make PVC booths, and they're like, I don't need pipe glue, and I don't need cross beams for my PVC booth. And then they'll put automute blankets over it, which are heavy, and they're just kind of like falls on them. So they're not hurt or anything, but it's just you don't want to have to do that every time. So that's a thing to consider too. Get enough PVC pipe if you're going to do that to build some cross beams. Like so it's not just post and lintel, like literally the most unstable structure design in all of architectural design. Like you need a cross beam, you need something another beam vertically, because all that wobble that'll fall on you if you like bump it, and you're gonna bump it. It's just a fact. So minimum space though, pretty important. If you just have like a regular like slide closet where it's maybe like 2 feet deep, you're probably going to have some problems utilizing that for a recording space. Maybe what you do is you kind of like fasten like an extension of a PVC booth around that, and then you have a little bit more. That's not the worst option, but ideally, a walk in closet or a drywall booth, they're going to be super effective. And dialing back from that, PVC booths can work with moving blankets, automute blankets. You can even put acoustic treatment outside of that. Um, for the people I've helped budget those kind of constructions, from the lower end, this is without microphone, without interface, without subscription to um, Audition. I think on the lower end, you're coming out around or less than like $300. Um, might be might be $200 if you find some great deals and you already have some tools lying around. But on the upper end, yeah, if, you're not really building a booth on, if you're getting a whisper room, um, you're putting it together, but it's prefabricated and it's definitely not on the cheap. So if you want something of that quality cheaper, you're gonna have to get some tools. You're gonna have to get a saw. Like you're gonna have to get a drill and probably some sandpaper and some wood glue. Um, and basically all your materials from there are gonna, you have to transport them. You They typically don't let you do too much wood cutting at the hardware store, so you're gonna need to be able to fit them in your car. Um, and then that can very easily add up to like over like $1,200 or less. That's a big number up front, but that's if you went like really good materials, really tight construction. If you hire a contractor, it's going to be more. Um, but you want to be careful with your materials if you do that. If you use fiberglass boards, um, what's the stuff? Rock wool. Everyone loves rock wool. You can still get
Yeah.
sick from inhaling those particles, even though they're like bio. I forgot what the word is, but like your body can break them down naturally. That's fine, but only so much at a time. Um, so I would suggest sealing those on the back, uh, cellophane wrap, like moving saran wrap. The stuff you see pallets wrapped up in at grocery stores, wrap that stuff up. Whether it's rock wool or Owens Corning fiberglass, just wrap it up. Those loose particles, you're huffing and puffing in an enclosed space, it gets into your lungs. And whether or not your body can break it down, your body will not be happy. Um, I saw a voice actor recently hospitalized, having recently done that, and they can't confirm or deny whether it was from having it be open back, but why risk it? It's another $30 to get a huge spool of that wrap. Just do that. Um, uh, there's a couple of longer questions that I want to save to the end, but I'm seeing them come through. We might be pretty close to the end, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, we might be. Can I just hop in with one short thing to keep in mind for anybody who's willing to truly dive into quieting their space with as low budget plans as possible? The thicker the materials you're working with to either absorb sound or deflect, reflect sound, the lower the frequencies that material will do the job for. So people with higher voices, female voices, they don't need as thick a material. Getting back to the thickness of panels, 2-inch panels should do fine for any voice that's about this pitch or higher. The lower the sound, the thicker the material should be. If you figure you have a bass voice and you're singing in a barbershop quartet as the bass voice, you're going to need really thick material to stop those frequencies from bouncing around the rooms. So yeah, if you've got a high voice, you're going to need thinner. Well, you should only need thinner material, less dense material. The lower your sound, the lower whether it's an instrument too or your voice, the thicker you're going to need. Higher, thinner, lower, thicker.
Yep, that's a pretty good way to think about it. Just even tying that back into what we were talking about with frequencies, higher frequencies reflect, lower frequencies build up. It's kind of the same thing. That's how you treat those, according to
Indeed.
yeah. I think we could probably start going through some of the questions in here, and if you guys
Yeah.
think of more questions along the way, just keep them coming in the chat. Um, I have from Alistair, what are some improvements you'd recommend from a PVC booth with moving blankets? I'll go ahead and go first, and if you want to add to that, I think the first thing I tend to tell people to do is to do like a clap test uh, outside of the booth
Yeah.
too,
Yep.
because we're in the booth and we're kind of mentally in our own little world too. We're not really thinking about that when we record. We get loud. You do a sound test for some studio that's like, give us a raw audio test. They're gonna hear outside of your booth because they don't know or care. They just hear reflections. So be ready to maybe even checkerboard some of your application of foam if you can't do the whole thing. But be ready to treat the space outside of your booth, and you can double blanket your booth, but it still might do that. Yeah, that would be my answer to that. Anything to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't think so. It is a very simple thing to do to deaden a space. The more material your budget can put up on a wall or a ceiling or whatever, just keep tossing it up there. Again, as long as the majority of your budget is spent on the sounds, better put that down, the sounds around you to your left and right, and the sounds wherever the microphone is pointing. You don't need anywhere near the amount of sound absorption or reflection material behind the microphone if you've got a cardioid mic. So yeah, stock it up at the back, go 3 or 4 blankets thick. Again, I love talking about the benefits of flannel, not just because it feels so good. But this stuff just fold it over once. Putting it up on a wall, that might be the first thing to try out on an extremely tight budget or somebody just starting out or testing out a new space. Yeah, whatever your budget can be, just double up on the thickness of it all and put it wherever the mic is pointing. I think that pretty well covers it, Randy.
Yeah, I would agree. Um, we have Liz here earlier asked, I might have answered this. Oh, yeah, that was about Whisper booths and Studio Bricks.
Hmm.
Again, I don't feel that they're a waste. I don't feel that they're overrated or a waste of money. I feel like they might be overpriced if you can be handy. If you can be handy, you can very easily make a parallelogram that's just as containing, or you can make something a little more nifty and uh, spice it up a bit if you like decorating things.
Yeah.
Uh, we
That's one
have,
of the that's one of the odd things I think about the human condition too, Randy. If I can say,
yeah,
take your time, everybody, in giving consideration to how it all looks. We are much more visual creatures than we are oral creatures. If you can focus as much on your own listening skills and understand sound enough, then the benefit of the final recording is going to show. But if you just want to put stuff up and put your money into into pretty lights and a lot of toys sitting around that look nice, yeah, that's good. You're welcome to approach everything you do however you want. But your money, in a practical sense, is best spent on the quality of the recording. So try to be an oral creature more than a visual creature.
yeah. And if I can devil's advocate that, um, it's not great when you might be that way. You might be practicing using your ears and not your eyes, but the people who hire you oftentimes absolutely do just use their eyes, and they're like, "Well, audio sounded great. Let's do a live call on session." And they're like, "Oh, that's your booth. Love your Christmas lights." Like, and then they ghost you. Like, it's a thing. So if you are gonna do that, like, take some time to just make it not a distraction, or to design it uh, very pleasingly. And that shouldn't have to be a thing, but it absolutely is a thing in terms of how this is treated recording from home sometimes. Um, Shell asked, how far to keep the microphone away from you. Does that all depend on your pitch? Uh, no.
No,
I got, yeah, I have some technical explanation there. Um, Example is when you're talking and then suddenly have to scream. Um, where would the microphone be placed to ensure volumes aren't peaked? Well, the microphone, it's got to stay the same distance, whether you're loud, soft, high pitch, low pitch, deep voice, high voice, whatever. Like,
thank you. Thank you,
it's got to
Randy.
stay the
Thank you.
same distance. Uh, but what you want to do, there's kind of two approaches here. One of them does make the engineer's job harder. The other one is going to make the performance like a little bit harder to communicate to the people participating in the session. So like, if you're gonna make the engineer's job harder but keep the performance energy going, you will be probably riding the gain. But I would suggest doing that before you get to action. Like, do it the night before and take note. Like, okay, when I yell, my interface gain has to be like at 11 o'clock for it to not clip or peak, right? And that's when I'm at my distance from my mic. Ideally, you get a jazz hand, you get a hang loose, whatever. Like, that's about the distance. Unless you have tiny Lego hands, it's pretty uniform for a lot of people. But uh, if you want to make the as little engineering as possible, you don't adjust it back to your normal talking. You just sound check it to whatever your loudest projection will be for it to not clip, and you leave it there for loud and soft. But you're going to want to check with the engineer. Different engineers have different preferences, whatever session you're in. Just ask, like, do you want me to adjust for loud volumes in terms of the gain, and turn it back up for normal volume projection? Or do you just want it at the same volume all the way across? And that's going to kind of answer your question. But what you end up doing when you pull away to get loud is you leave more room for reflections to get in the mic before you do. So then that's really hard to remove, and that's just they're gonna need a pickup, or it's gonna sound not great. Um, But that's why you
And
keep it in.
the opposite also has a that odd effect by the design of my cardioid microphones. If you get in too close, there's something called the proximity effect, which artificially boosts the bass frequencies. So it doesn't sound quite like you.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound natural. Like most of the time, like I know some of us have like these really cool like bass voices, like movie trailer, like monster god voices and stuff. And like a lot of that is just gonna be carved out in post. Like they're just gonna be like, well, that sounds really cool, but we gotta take all that shit out. And now they sound like a normal person. Because they can't
Those people have those low frequencies by birth, though. It's like their vocal cords are like 4 or 5 times the size, and wow,
yeah,
they really
some
sound
people just
great.
have that. But if,
Yeah,
you know, if you're leaning in a lot to get that proximity effect, it's gonna have to just be processed out anyway. So just do your best to keep a consistent mic technique. That's a good question. Alejandro asked, "What's the best way to combat the parallel wall issue if your space is confined to that dimension?" Stuff the corners. Corners make a great disruption because a lot of times sound does kind of ride the wall until it gets to the corner. And if you notice, I just broke up the corner with that panel there. I didn't like choose a wall. I just evenly divided it on both walls. That works really well. Um, General treatment of the space to disrupt the flat surface, anything really. But in your case, for recording voice in a booth, just foam it up. If you foam up the space, you don't have to like rearrange the construction really. But if you have, you know, not parallel walls, that's great too. Um, just acoustically, like in a terms of physics, it just makes so little sense to me to just have your parallelogram be your recording chamber. Um,
yeah, I agree. Invited asked, does 2-inch minimum thickness for foam panels also apply to materials like fiberglass and rockwood? It does. It does.
I agree.
As soon as you have any type of material that feels thicker and feels more dense than, say, a cushion on your couch, yeah, the thicker the better for sure. And foam panels, their name is a little misrepresentative. Proper foam panels, acoustic foam panels, the bubbles in them are why they're made that way. They capture small air bubbles, and the more air that cannot be moved, in other words, air inside dense materials, that is some of the best, if not the best, how shall I say, lightest but densest material to both reflect and absorb sounds, whether it's reflections off the wall or sounds coming from outside the room, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, as long as it's foamy or it's insulation foam, fiberglass, rockwood, anything like that, 2 inches is really good. And again, if you're recording lower frequencies, go thicker if you can.
Yeah, and it's worth looking at how much square footage you're gonna have to cover. Like,
Yeah.
just take the measurements on your wall. You know, do your basic surface area multiplication, like length times width, and get that measured out for square footage. Because your foam, typically the stuff you buy, like it's going to be in a square foot, and you can add that up ahead of time and decide, is it going to be cheaper for me to get all of that for square footage, um, or will it be cheaper to get something like carpet padding and moving blankets or upholstery foam? Like, you know, that's really how you're gonna start cutting corners on cost without it sacrificing the sound quality, is comparing your options and doing some math, like basic math. Um, I understand how difficult that is and stressful, especially when you start seeing the price tag, like, not budge. But you have to probe for your options. Different places have different prices. Like, when you start to do that, put on some music you enjoy and just accept that it's gonna be a little bit of uphill work, but it's gonna save you a lot of time and money in the future. That's I think that's the gist of like really being as cost effective as you can. You don't have to just use acoustic materials. Anything with the word acoustic on it is going to be charged like 15% more just because they like, we know they need this. Like, we're going to charge them for it. Like, it's a thing, but you can get creative. Like, what else feels like this? Okay, maybe I get that on my walls somehow. Um, it doesn't have to be like a bass trap, like a foam wedge bass trap. You can put packaging, uh, like old blankets from the thrift store, um, pillows, throw pillows you don't use, things like that. You can put that into bags and like wrap that in a blanket or something, and that still will do the exact same thing. Um, but it will not look pretty, and you don't want to look like you have a bunch of trash bags on your booth. So be ready to cosmetify it just a little bit. I think another thing we should probably touch on in the last couple minutes here is some hardware considerations. Um, that is part of your recording studio. I think it is. You can't really do your job without an interface and a mic. Um, the thing I would want to caution is like when you get cheaper interfaces, a lot of times you get what you pay for. It's true. A lot of times when you start getting lower than like 120 bucks, like these are things that are going to be like replaced pretty quickly because the components are they're not that they're not that substantial. They're just going to fail sooner. They're going to have other little bugs like hiss and noise floor. They're not going to be very voltage compatible a lot of times, so you get EMF ring. And with those come with microphones that are kind of generic too. There's nothing wrong with a cheap mic. I love the entire Audio Technica line because they have things at every budget point and they sound great. But sooner or later, you're going to want to upgrade that. So it's about getting the most bang for your buck, mileage. Look at stuff that's like been tried and true for several years. If you got a product that like just came out in the last 5 years, you don't know that it's going to last very long. I have in the last like 8 weeks, I have a service called Help Your Audio, and like 6 out of 8 of those appointments have all been for one specific interface that's starting to fail that came out about 5 years ago. Um, it's a great interface, the SSL2, fantastic quality, but it's clearly got a shelf life that other people are experiencing. So look at things with prolonged support. Look at things that might be maybe they're a little above the budget you're hoping for, but read the reviews. Read reviews in terms of recency. Um, that's going to tell you a lot. And don't hesitate to ask the person selling it, like, which one has the longest customer service line? Which one has the best warranties? Um, support matters a lot. So, mic and interface, you might have to spend more on that, but I do think that makes a significant difference.
Just one last note on that. Uh, Try to remember, everybody, that you probably have a really decent music instrument store chain somewhere near you. So when you buy a new mic, especially when you're getting into like the $250, $300 range or higher, and a brand new interface, give some serious consideration to buying it locally for the obvious advantage of that shop is very likely going to have to honor warranties, repairs, follow ups, replacements, whatever else. Don't be afraid to look around your area for music instrument shops. They have a lot of equipment now, right from mics and stands and all kinds of accessories that anybody who wants to record anything, even beyond a voice, it's probably just down the street, and you'll get a lot of extra service down the road if you're gonna, if something fails and you're gonna have to go for help.
Yeah. I think we're up against our time here. Um,
We are.
yeah, but I hope we got all the questions. If we didn't, please feel free to you can send me a message if you want on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can find me. I think my handle is at just Randy Greer on Twitter, and then I think it's the same on Blue Sky. And if you want to reach out for anything more, um, I guess more technical, you can send an email or visit my website. That My partner and I kind of co-started Scary Good Studio. It's scarygood.studio or scarygoodstudio@gmail.com.
Yeah, I'm the same. Should you anybody feel like that they'd like to get into a bit more specific stuff, to make it the easiest here in my bio here on Discord, you'll see a link to my website. I tend to be on here a lot because I have clients that use it to manage their projects. And again, Randy, thanks for asking me to be part of this. And Jasmine, and Bernardo, and everybody else, thank you very much for showing up.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.